So this is the first video in a series of videos about Hegel. And this video series is going to be Hegel for non-philosophers. I'm going to be trying to explain Hegel in ways that are clear, as simple as possible, in language that is hopefully doesn't require a philosophy degree to understand. Now, Hegel is one of the most difficult philosophers to understand in the history of philosophy, and that's not because he's writing intentionally in an obscure way. It's because what he's talking about is actually very difficult. But Hegel is the foundation for the dialectical method adopted by Marx and at the basis of dialectical materialism. Lenin famously said that nobody could completely understand Marx's Capital without first mastering Hegel's Science of Logic. But of course, not everybody has time to fully master Marx's Capital, especially if this requires mastering Hegel's Science of Logic. The revolution's never going to happen if everyone has to fully master Capital. However, I think it's good to at least know something about dialectics and know something about the Hegelian method, because Hegel and Hegelian philosophy trains you to think dialectically, and we need to think about problems in a dialectical manner in the same way that Marx did, so that we can solve these problems and understand the reality around us. So then, who was Hegel? Hegel was a 19th century German idealist philosopher. In some way, he's the pinnacle of German idealism. There's a way in which philosophy after Hegel has just been a series of attempts to either undermine Hegel or show that Hegel did not kind of bring philosophy to its pinnacle. Regarding Marx and Hegel, Marx said it very plainly: my relationship to Hegel is simple. I am his disciple. Marx considered himself to be a Hegelian philosopher. The difference is that Hegel is an idealist philosopher and Marx is a materialist philosopher. Marx famously said that he turned Hegel on his head. And the kernel, the rational kernel from Hegel that Marx took, is this dialectical method developed by Hegel. As for Hegel's own politics, Hegel was a liberal and a supporter of the French Revolution at a time when Germany was under feudal relations and under a monarchy. Hegel is sometimes said to have been radical in his youth, but have turned reactionary and pro-monarchy in his old age. This rumor is often exacerbated by people like Karl Popper, who were anti-communists and wanted to discredit dialectics and discredit Hegel. Hegel was a liberal through and through. In his later years, his students were some of the most radical students in the revolutionary student movement. They were the furthest to the left of the people who were involved in the German Revolution of 1848. And Hegel materially supported the revolutionary activities of his students. In one instance, he put up 3 months' worth of salary as bail for a student who had been arrested for political activities. Another one of his students wrote a defense of a person who committed a political assassination, and he wrote a defense, like some people defended Luigi, and Hegel stuck his neck out for that student. And so, while Hegel's philosophy of right, his politics, was seen as a concession, because Hegel self-censored, like some liberal academics did, when things look too radical and they worry that they don't want to rock the boat too much but want to get their ideas out. And that was seen as a betrayal and as capitulating by some of his students. But it was very clear at the same time what side of the movement Hegel was on. Hegel has 2 masterpieces, The Phenomenology of Spirit and The Science of Logic. These books are very, very difficult, very hard to understand. Usually you read this one first because it's the kind of introduction to his system that begins with logic. But The Logic is the book that is most important for dialectical materialism and for Marx. While people say start with the phenomenology before the logic, before the phenomenology, there's a lot of easier things by Hegel that I would recommend reading first. And I'll take you through some of them in this short series of Hegel for beginners and start breaking down some of the basics of dialectics. Now, this is not the only version of Hegel's logic. There's also the encyclopedia logic, sometimes called the shorter logic, while this is called the bigger logic. And the lesser logic is sometimes actually harder to follow because it's a summary, but a lot of it is very clear and it has notes from Hegel's lectures. But actually, there's a text, I don't have a physical copy of it here, but there's the 1831 Berlin Lectures on Logic. And the lectures on logic, I think, are the clearest presentation of Hegel's logical system, because it's him talking to his students, so it can be often very accessible for people who are newer to Hegel. But the first thing I would recommend reading by Hegel is a short essay that you can find on Marxist.org called Who Thinks Abstractly? And I'll talk a little bit about it in the next video in this series of Hegel for Beginners.